Hello, my name is Jennifer Hollett. I'm the Executive Director of the Walrus, and I will also be your host this evening. Welcome to Manulife Presents the Walrus Talks Nature, supported by Trans Canada Trail. Now, question for you. You can make some noise, you can clap, but give me a sense, who here loves nature? Who here loves nature, but sometimes nature doesn't love you back? I'm thinking sunburns, mosquito bites, aching bones. Okay. And who here wants to spend more time in nature? I ask because I'm all the above, and I'm very invested and interested in tonight's talks. We're thrilled to be here in person in Toronto at the Isabel Theatre and streaming live online at thewalrus.ca. A big hello and welcome to the over 500 households who have registered for our live stream. Can we give them an in-person welcome to the event? We encourage you, whether you are IRL, in real life, or online, to share this conversation on social media. Hashtag is a great way to connect our two audiences. So our hashtag is hashtag Walrus Talks, and you can tag us on the socials at The Walrus. I'd like to start by acknowledging nature, the land that we're on. We're gathered within the bounds of Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is also the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Today, Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We're really honored to carry on a tradition of storytelling, and we encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the land that you're on, whether you're joining us here in this room or online from across the country and beyond. A bit about the Walrus. The Walrus started as an optimistic project over 2 decades ago now to foster conversations across Canada. These conversations are complex and oh so necessary. And for us, they take place in many different forms at the Walrus. We're online at thewalrus.ca. We're in print on newsstands or by subscribing to the Walrus. You can also listen to our podcasts or take part in events like this one. And this work is made possible by our donors, our supporters, and our partners. So thank you all for being a part of this conversation. And thank you to Manulife for sponsoring tonight's event and to the Trans Canada Trail for supporting this evening. Now, to tell us more about this partnership, please welcome to the stage Trans Canada Trail's interim CEO, Megan Reddick.
Good evening, esteemed guests and fellow nature enthusiasts. Welcome to Walrus Talks. I'm Megan Reddick, the interim CEO of Trans Canada Trail. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight as we delve into the conversation that is close to my heart and many of yours, nature. I'd like to highlight the vital connection between our work at Trans Canada Trail and the profound impact that trails have on all of our lives. From the shores of the Atlantic to the West Coast forests, from the Rocky Mountains to the Arctic, Canada is a treasure trove of natural beauty. And yet, to truly enjoy these stunning landscapes, Canadians need a way to connect with them, and that's where trails come in. Trans Canada Trail is a gateway to nature. More than 28,000 kilometers long, it connects all 3 oceans. It plays a crucial role in enhancing our physical, mental, and social well-being. Especially, it's important that the trail is accessible for everyone. As a national charity, we rely on the generosity of sponsors and donors, so at this time, I would like to say a very special thank you to Manulife for their impressive, unwavering commitment to making the Trans Canada Trail more accessible for everyone. We believe that anyone, regardless of age, ability, or background, should have the opportunity to experience the incredible beauty that surrounds Canada's National Trail. We are so proud to work with socially minded partners like Manulife to create inclusive spaces where everyone can walk, run, and roll freely. As you listen to all the speakers tonight, I'd like to encourage you all to think about how important it is to preserve and to protect nature, especially the trails that connect all of us. And if the conversations that you're hearing tonight resonate with you, I would like to ask you to do two things. One, please come and visit us in our booth outside here. We'd love to talk to you more about trails. And two, please consider making a donation to Trans-Canada Trail so that it's there for future generations to come. Visit tctrail.ca for more information. So thanks for connecting tonight. Your interest in national environments and natural environments is truly inspiring. Let the conversation begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And now, please welcome to the stage Manulife Investment Management's Managing Director of Private Markets, Myles Atwood.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. Hello, bonjour. My name is Myles Atwood. I'm a Managing Director at Manulife Investment Management, and we're really proud to be supporting the event this evening. You know, Manulife is both a global leading life insurer, but we're also a leading asset manager. And we're really focused on making decisions easier and lives better. And so, you know, this is the point where many of you are probably thinking, why or what is the connection between financial services and nature? And the answer is Manulife has actually been investing in real assets for about 100 years, things like infrastructure, real estate, timberland, and farmland. And we are also the largest natural capital investor in the world through our timberland and agriculture investments. And we believe, you know, that investments in nature are actually fundamental to any optimal portfolio. And it's through those investments on behalf of our clients that we've actually planted more than 1.3 billion trees around the world. We've removed around 1.8 million metric tons of CO2 annually over the past 5 years. And we've also created thousands of jobs for timberland and agriculture operators in both local and indigenous communities around the world. So we understand how important it is to protect nature and biodiversity. And today, more than half of the world's global GDP, actually $54 trillion, about $54 trillion, is actually moderately or highly dependent on nature, which represents a tremendous opportunity to invest in a healthier, more prosperous, greener, and equitable future. And so, whilst many of us understand the value of nature and the positive impact it has on our economy and obviously our health, we're not as familiar with the daily deliberate and accidental decisions that we make that can impact the future of our planet. Things like deforestation, things like over-harvesting, pollution, or agriculture. And so for us to continue growing a happy and healthy economy and society, it's really critical for institutions, both public and private, and individuals like yourselves, to understand how we can partner to make a difference when it comes to the health of our planet. You know, we can't go it alone. We have to come together on this topic, which is, you know, why we're proud to support the event this evening tonight with Walrus. You know, it's a platform that's really bringing people together with some incredible expert and voices here in front of us on the topic of nature. It's also why we're proud to partner with the Trans-Canada Trail to support their accessibility mapping program, which is providing Canadians of all abilities with access to trails across Canada. So, you know, we hope that the insights gained today allow us to connect with nature on a deeper level tomorrow, and hopefully we can all have a more positive impact on the planet. So thank you and enjoy the event.
Thank you so much, Myles. It feels auspicious to have this talk today on the first day of spring, but especially on Nowruz. So Nowruz Mubarak to anyone who is celebrating Happy Persian New Year. Canada is known for our nature, our gorgeous natural landscapes. We are home to so many beautiful national parks and hiking trails that exist to provide access and connect us to nature. And there are so many benefits from being in nature. I know when I'm away from my screens, out in nature, I can feel it. And you'll hear all about that tonight. But there are also some questions we have to ask ourselves about our parks. Are they truly accessible for everyone who wants to access them? Also, how do we reconcile the darker history of environmental conservation that saw the enforced removal of Indigenous peoples with our unfettered access to those parks today? And what do we really want out of parks and trails, and what should they look like for future generations to come? Tonight, you'll be hearing from 7 speakers who have 7 minutes each. We'll share 7 different perspectives. We have Sean Kheraj, Associate Professor, Department of History, Vice Provost, Academic, Toronto Metropolitan University. Marlaine Koehler, Executive Director, Waterfront Regeneration Trust. Iraz Soyalp, PhD, Director, Social Impact, Private Markets, Manulife Investment Management. Dr. Melissa Lem, Director, Park Prescriptions, I love the sound of that, BC Parks Foundation and family physician. Carolynne Crawley, founder, Miss Nokama, co-founder, Turtle Protectors and Forest Therapy Guide, also like the sound of that. Ambika Tenneti, environmentalist and PhD candidate. I mean, we have big brains on this lineup. And Dianne Whelan, filmmaker, photographer, author, and public speaker. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to kick it off now.
Okay. So, my name is Sean Kheraj. I'm a Canadian environmental historian from Toronto Metropolitan University. For those of you who don't know, environmental historians study the relationships between people and the rest of nature in the past. We explore how people have interacted with and thought about the natural world over the course of human history. The story I want to tell you this evening is about just that, how people have interacted with and thought about nature over time in Canada. And to do so, I'm going to share 3 brief episodes of how people in Canada thought about their relationship with something we struggle with still to this day, oil and the pipelines that deliver oil to consumers across Canada and beyond. I'm sometimes asked if Canadians always opposed the construction of oil pipelines, and the answer is yes, but not in the ways we might think of today. So the story I hope to tell to you today will illustrate 3 things. 1, how people interact with and think about nature is shaped by who we are, our identities. 2, how people interact with and think about nature is shaped by where and how we live, our geographies and our economies. And 3, how people interact with and think about nature changes over time, our histories. So to understand this story, you need to know a little bit about how Canada moves oil from the places where it's drawn from the earth to the places where we refine it and burn it. Canada has been a major producer of oil since the late 1940s, and most of that oil comes from Alberta. The people who consume most of that oil live very far from Alberta, in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Seattle, Chicago. To move crude oil from Alberta to all of these distant places, corporations and governments built 3 main trunk pipelines from the 1950s to the 1980s. One travels from Edmonton eastward through to the United States Midwest, Toronto, and Montreal. That's called the Interprovincial Pipeline. Another travels in the other direction, westward from Edmonton to Vancouver, and that's called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And then a third travels from the Northwest Territories south to Alberta and then carries onward to those other 2 pipelines, and that's called the Norman Wells Pipeline. And together, they consist of one of the world's largest oil pipeline systems, and they deliver billions of liters of crude oil every year. The first episode is from 1952. A man named C.J. Lewis went door to door on Lyndhurst Road collecting signatures from his neighbors in Burnaby, British Columbia. The Trans Mountain oil pipeline was going to be built under their front yards. They're going ahead with this thing without consulting the property owners, and there's no compensation for destruction of our shade trees, Lewis told members of the Burnaby City Council. The council was somewhat at a loss for what to do. They didn't believe they had any authority to determine the route of this pipeline. They decided to contact the pipeline company to see what could be done, but in the words of Burnaby's mayor, the measure's under the jurisdiction of the Public Utilities Commission. It can go wherever it likes. Episode 2, 1961. During a National Energy Board hearing into an extension of the interprovincial pipeline in southern Ontario, settler farmers turned up at the hearings to raise their concerns. They were concerned about the potential adverse effects on the environment where they farmed, degradation of topsoil, damage to drainage systems, oil spills. Norman Robertson, a local farmer, appeared at this hearing representing a group of farmers in his community. He made the case for moving the pipeline to a different route in order to avoid crossing farmland in his area. In his closing remarks to the board, he said, "We don't oppose this pipeline. We think it's a benefit to the Canadian economy, and as suggested, it's a fine thing to have. But future planning is so important that to be ruthless about it and to not consider what our children and our children's children are going to find would be a detriment to all concerned." Episode 3, 1980. By this time, Indigenous people had finally won the opportunity to have their voices heard on these matters. And when a company proposed to build an oil pipeline in the southern Mackenzie Valley from Norman Wells in the Northwest Territories to Alberta, members of the Tenneti First Nation showed up at a hearing to express their opposition. Pierre Bassa, a trapper from Treaty 8 territory, told the board the following: "There are numerous oil and gas wells all over my trap line. I had to evacuate from my cabin once when a pipeline broke. This fall, I'll have to go further up north because of this. There have been oil spills, pipeline ruptures in the past. Sometimes I've found rabbits covered in oil. Their tracks leave black marks." These 3 vignettes of Canadians from the past speaking out and sharing their concerns about the development of oil pipelines leave us with traces of the ideas that people once used to describe their relationships with nature. Each saw potential environmental harms to nature: the destruction of shade trees in a suburban neighborhood, the degradation of farmland, damage to wildlife used for hunting. Their views of those harms were shaped by their identities, how they engaged with and worked with nature: a suburban landowner who landscaped his front yard for beauty and aesthetics, a settler farmer who plants and harvests crops, an Indigenous trapper whose people have lived with and used wildlife resources of the land since time immemorial. What's most striking, though, is the language they didn't use when expressing these ideas: ecosystem, climate change, biosphere. The way people in Canada have thought about nature and how best to protect it has changed over time. The concerns expressed in these 3 episodes were more local than global. They were tied to immediate experiences with the disruptive effects of oil pipelines in daily life and anxieties about the future. To understand how people thought about and debated nature protection in the past, we have to consider the context of who they were, where they lived, and how they related to their environments. And to understand our environmental debates in the present, we could strive to do the same thing. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marlaine Koehler, and I'm the Executive Director of the Waterfront Regeneration Trust, the charity leading the movement to regenerate the Great Lakes waterfront with the establishment of the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. Founded by the Honorable David Crombie, some of you may remember him as the tiny perfect mayor, the charity evolved from the Royal Commission on the Future of the Toronto Waterfront, also led by David Crombie. The Commission delivered 83 groundbreaking recommendations, leading to a major change in waterfront and watershed planning. One of those recommendations was the creation of a waterfront trail to connect recreational areas, wildlife habitats to each other, communities to communities, city to country, people to nature. And while the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail is an amazing collective accomplishment belonging to many, it owes its existence to people like you. The idea of the trail came from hundreds of individuals who demanded more for the waterfront at public hearings held by the Crombie Commission. People were frustrated with the short-sighted land use development decisions, acres of underutilized waterfront, the rising curtain of residential towers, the lack of public access to the water's edge, poor water quality, and the absence of connections. They also had a vision for what they wanted, a healthy, vibrant waterfront. And why not, they challenged, connect all the public, natural, and cultural spaces along the shore to create a trail set within a greenway. The trail would represent and redefine our relationship to the Great Lakes, the world's largest supply of fresh water, an invaluable resource and global treasure. It would be a way to connect the public to the land use decisions and ecological imperatives. Thanks to our many partners and supporters, including the Trans-Canada Trail, that recommendation is becoming a reality. After 30 years, the award-winning trail stretches 3,600 kilometers from Sault Ste. Marie to Quebec. Work is underway to extend the trail around Lake Superior. Investments large and small continue to advance the work of achieving the legacy goal of a dedicated trail as close to the water's edge as environmentally feasible, a trail that contributes to the ecology, economy, and quality of life of each community. Today, the trail links 170 communities, including 5 First Nations, all 4 of Canada's Great Lakes, 5 binational rivers, 24 heritage rivers, 4 UNESCO biospheres, 68 national and provincial parks, including Canada's first national urban park in the Rouge Valley, 538 parks, 106 protected natural areas, 266 beaches. Trail projects have included brownfield remediation, natural habitat restoration, aquatic habitat creation, interpretive signage, and establishing connections along the river valleys. It's a signed route that combines quiet residential streets, rural roads, dedicated paths, boardwalks, promenades, and secondary highways, especially in rural and northern Ontario. But it's so much more than that. To quote David Crombie, with its beautiful vistas, restored wetlands, protected forest, expansive sand dunes, the trail is the critical first step towards protecting and restoring the natural heritage of the Great Lakes ecosystem. For those who don't have a backyard or a cottage, the Waterfront Trail and Greenway are crucial ways to reconnect to nature and all the benefits that come with that. It provides a spectacular experience to all that travel along it, and I can say this with confidence because for the past 16 years, we have hosted one of Ontario's top cycle tours, the Great Waterfront Trail Adventure. We launched the venture in 2008 to celebrate the achievement of a signed route from Niagara to Quebec and the completion of 53 regeneration projects. The annual ride's fully supported, attracting people between the ages of 16 and 80 from all over North America. Participants ride at their own pace, camp or stay in hotels, and community partners host rest stops to greet the riders. There's as much fun off the bike as there is cycling. For most people, it is an eye-opening experience, rediscovering the beauty and the challenges that face our waterfront, visiting communities they had previously only known as 401 exits. They are moving moments on the ride, like being sent off with a traditional traveling song by the Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, or sitting with the elders at the Serpent River powwow grounds to learn about the significance fire and water hold in their culture, or dipping your toes in the water and stretching your gaze across the vastness of the lake as you bask in the sense of gratitude. The trail furnishes us with a way to interact with nature's treasures and connects us to countless stories, both past and present, but also the future. As you experience the trail, you can't help but see the potential of this special place where land touches water and want more for it and want to be part of its protection and renewal. In the next 5 to 10 years, we will achieve a continuous signed route establishing a firm foundation for the trail and Regeneration's vision and mission. One of our jobs is to ensure that each generation of professionals, advocates, champions, and trail users contribute to the legacy so that it doesn't wither and get neglected. To bring the trail closer to the water's edge, protect public spaces, advocate for design excellence, support conservation and habitat protection, celebrate cultural heritage, and develop new ways to enjoy and experience the trail, all to contribute to the wellness, vibrancy of our ecology, economy, and quality of life. Growing up in Etobicoke, my relationship with the lakes had a rocky beginning. My mom's from the north, and as far as she was concerned, Lake Ontario was a smelly cesspool to be avoided. Thanks to my work with the Trust and their experience with the trail, which they have traveled extensively, my daughters have a very different relationship with the Great Lakes. Today, they are the beneficiaries of the trail's bold vision. Tomorrow, I know they'll contribute to it. In fact, they already are. I invite you to use this legacy trail to develop your own adventure and rebuild your relationship with this special place. Our website has great ideas and planning tools, and you're welcome to call me if you need any more help. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iraz Soyalp, and I'm the Director of Social Impact and Private Markets at Manulife Investment Management. Inger Anderson, United Nations Environment Program's Executive Director, once said, "No one can take away the clean environment, nature, water, and air away from us." And she said this at a very, very historic moment. She said this when the UN accepted a resolution recognizing right to clean environment as a human right. This, of course, did not come as a surprise, as we see increased pollution and loss of biodiversity. I'm not here today to talk about the fact that we should be preserving the nature, we should not be using plastics, or we should not be contaminating environment, water, or air. In 2024, I hope we already have a common understanding and agreement on that. Instead, I would like to take your attention to a topic that often goes unnoticed: unequal access to nature. You may think that nature is out there, free, and for everyone. Probably you walked through the Queen's Park when you were coming down to this theater, or maybe you went out for a run in a trail this morning, maybe not today in the snowy weather, but maybe yesterday or last Wednesday when it was 18 degrees. But it's not everyone's story. Since the Industrial Revolution, our minds were set to grow economically. And economic growth did not come with equitable benefits for everyone. There is abundance of evidence when it comes to inequalities in accessing food, housing, shelter, education, or health, you name it, right? But we do not think about the inequalities that some of us may be facing when it comes to accessing nature. Yet, there are plenty of barriers. In addition to the physical barriers, there are economic barriers, psychological barriers, cultural barriers, or like other barriers. People of color and low-income families are not only more susceptible to immunocompromising diseases because they disproportionately live in areas with more toxic air and water pollution, they also have few safe and close-to-home green and blue spaces to go. Children, people with disabilities, or elderly refrain from using green and blue spaces due to lack of drinking fountains, seating arrangements, or toilets. Women feel less safe in those spaces. It refrains them from using them. Research shows that in the US, 74% of the non-white households are living in the nature-deprived areas. This figure goes up to 23% among the white households. Coming back home, Canada. Research showed that 76% of the Canadian households with less than $20,000 annual income have a safe and close-to-home green space to go. This figure goes up to 95% among the households with more than $150,000 per year. Access to nature is a human right. This is where we belong. This is where we feel happy, where we replenish, where we forget about our worries. Remember our days during COVID. It was our only and one shelter. We were looking forward to go out to take a fresh air, to take a breath of fresh air. The benefits of spending time in nature is clear. Students who spend more time in nature perform much better in standardized tests. They show more enthusiasm towards school. They have better attendance rates. Spending time in nature reduces mortality and morbidity due to chronic diseases. It improves our mental health, it reduces obesity, and it improves our general quality of life. Yet, many people are deprived from these benefits, and it's not because of their fault. Proximity to nature is one factor, but it does not paint the full picture. Neighborhood exposure is an important way that we engage with the nature, but also the habits, our attitudes, the norms that we follow, also defines how much voluntary time we spend in nature. 1 in 5 Canadians are foreign-born, and you know what? They find the Canadian nature wild and frightening. Surprising you? Cultural, religious, gender, and social norms define how we engage with nature. For the fellow Torontonians in the room, I'll take you to the Trinity Bellwoods Park. When you go there over the weekend, you will see people around 30 years of age playing spike ball. If you go to Sunnybrook Park, you will see extended families barbecuing and bonding with their grandchildren. This is how differently we engage with nature. Our background matters. If we do not take these differences into account, and if we do not address these inequities in accessing nature, women will continue feeling unsafe in those trails, or a mother of 3 will find it too costly and time-consuming to take a bus to be able to find a green space, to be able to play soccer with her kids, and families in downtown who look forward for the weekend to be able to barbecue with their grandchildren will not be able to do so. I am not asking to build barbecue stations all across the town. This is not what I ask. But when we build food security, hunger programs, we take proximity, social norms, gender norms, religious norms into account, because we want people to benefit from the programs that we are offering to them. You know why? We recognize food security as a human right. So is nature. Access to nature, access to clean environment is a human right. We should be taking the same approach when it comes to municipal programming and community investment programming. I know that there are many of you in the room, individuals, institutions, organizations, people who spoke before me. They are already working towards this common goal. And my call here today is to do more. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melissa Lem, a family doctor, director of park prescriptions for the BC Parks Foundation, and president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. And I am particularly happy to be here tonight with you, and by here I mean in the geographical sense, in Toronto, because this is where my health and nature journey began. Tonight, I'm going to share with you some of the evidence behind the health benefits of nature and also how nature prescriptions can improve the health of people and the planet. Even though I now live in Vancouver, I was born and raised in Toronto. In the 1980s, the eastern edge of the city where I lived was majority white. And my feeling of being an outsider was reinforced by other kids who would stretch their eyes up at the corners with their fingers at me or exclude me from their games on the playground. But it was in the park down the street where I could climb up to the tops of trees without my parents watching, or in my garden in my backyard where I would pick leafy Chinese greens and cherry tomatoes side by side, where I felt a deep sense of belonging. I still remember when we drove our wood-paneled station wagon up to Bruce Peninsula National Park for the first time to go on our very first camping trip, and sitting in front of a crackling campfire, looking up at the dark sky full of stars and thinking, this is where I want to be for the rest of my life. Even at 8 years old, when I had no idea about the evidence behind the health benefits of nature, I was instinctively using nature to self-medicate. It was only after becoming a doctor and moving back to Toronto from the mountains and forests of northern BC and experiencing nature deficit 15 years ago that I discovered this massive body of evidence. I still remember looking out my apartment window past concrete and glass at this tiny square of sky with a CN Tower in it, and wondering why I felt so edgy, and realizing I think it's because I'm missing nature. Of course, any well-trained doctor doesn't believe anything unless it's backed up by randomized controlled trials. So I sat down at my laptop to do a literature review using the words nature and health. And much to my surprise, hundreds of studies popped up about a huge variety of health conditions, from high blood pressure, diabetes, and cancer care to anxiety, depression, and developmental outcomes in kids. This ever-expanding science is why we like to call nature time the fourth pillar of health, just as important as healthy diet, exercise, and sleep at preventing disease and maintaining our well-being. Consider this. A study done right here in Toronto showed that having 10 more trees on your block is equivalent to your health perception of having $10,000 per year more income or being 7 years younger. One study in Chicago showed that children with ADHD who took a 20-minute walk in a park improved their concentration and attention scores similar to the effects of Ritalin. Now, no one is saying that a 20-minute walk in the park is going to do everything that prescription stimulant medication does, but I think this speaks to how powerful nature time can be as an adjunct to what we traditionally prescribe in the office. Which brings me to the topic of nature prescriptions. PaRx is Canada's national nature prescription program, where any regulated health professional in any province across Canada can literally prescribe nature to their patients to improve their health. We have a standard dosing recommendation of at least 2 hours per week and at least 20 minutes each time. That's based on the latest research showing that adults who spend at least 120 minutes in nature feel significantly healthier, and that cortisol, your primary stress hormone, drops the fastest between 20 to 30 minutes of a meaningful nature experience. Today, after just 3 years, PaRx has over 13,000 registered prescribers, including almost 7% of doctors across the country who have collectively issued 800,000 nature prescriptions to their patients. Our innovative approach and our work to reduce barriers to nature access with organizations like PaRx Canada, the Toronto Zoo, and just announced today the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority have put us on the map nationally and internationally. We've been endorsed by over 100 major health and parks organizations, including the Canadian Medical Association, the first national doctors association in the world to formally endorse nature prescribing and include it in official policy. In 2021, the World Health Organization recognized our program as an effective way to inspire protection and restoration of nature as the foundation of our health. Within the last year alone, we have helped to raise $10 million in funding as co-investigators and advisors on major research projects in Europe and Australia to expand the knowledge base behind nature prescriptions and, most exciting to me, scale up nature prescribing around the world. And we're just getting started. As a parent and an environmental advocate, I also know that advocating for nature equity across every neighborhood in every city and connecting people to it are essential for healthy people and a healthy planet. In 2021, the Western Canada heat dome killed 619 people in BC in just 1 week. And this was the worst mass casualty weather event in Canada's history. In Vancouver, most of our hospitalizations came from the downtown east side, which is both one of the most economically deprived areas of the city and also one of the areas of the city with the least amount of tree cover, which made it physically hotter. Research showed that lack of proximity to green space was an independent risk factor for death, right alongside being elderly or socially isolated. Urban nature is not just a nice to have, it's a must have for our health. Another big motivator for my work is that research tells us that people who are more connected to nature across the lifespan are more likely to do more to protect it. They engage in and support more pro-environmental behaviors and policies like energy conservation or a tax on carbon that fight climate change and make this world a healthier place for all of us. I began by telling you about how important my early experiences with nature were for my own health and well-being. And my goal is for every child and adult across this country to be connected to nature and have the opportunity to find belonging in it just the same way I did. And this has inspired my life's work. Until that happens, don't forget to spend at least 2 hours in nature each week, at least 20 minutes each time. Doctor's orders. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carolynne Crawley. I'm the founder of Msit and the co-founder of Turtle Protectors. I was born in Mi'kmaq territory, which is also known today as Nova Scotia, but Toronto has been my home for the past 50 years since I was a young child. I'm here today to speak with you about relationship with the land through Indigenous ways of knowing and being. I am Mi'kmaq, Black, and Irish. And Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast have been in this deep and meaningful relationship with the land since time immemorial. I am very thankful that I grew up with a deep relationship with the land that was nurtured in me during my upbringing through cultural teachings. I was the kid that, always brought home and helped lost, injured, and orphan animals. I still do this today through my work as Turtle Protectors. I was the kid who stayed outside until the street lights came on. I was the kid, and still today, talked to the animals, the plants, the trees, and the insects, the same way as I speak to my friends and my family. And so I remember growing up in Scarborough at a time when Scarborough was mostly farms and forests, very long time ago when I think about it. At that time, I was living across the street from the woods, and as kids in the neighborhood, we would gather together. We had forts, we would roast crab apples, we had so many great times. I can even remember that we had initiation that if you wanted to enter our fort, you had to stand beside the wasp nests, right, for a period of time until we felt that that was a good enough time, then you can come into the fort. And so I have these fond memories, but I also remember one day when there were tall fences that were erected and we couldn't access the forest. I don't know how long that happened because, the concept of time is so different when you're a child. But I remember the day when those fences came down. I remember even to this moment the deep sadness and grief that I held. For when those fences came down, I saw that many of the trees had been cut down, that the plants and the tall grasses were replaced with turf grass, that our forts were no longer there. They had been replaced with a community center and a baseball diamond. It was interesting because we didn't really need those structures because we were already gathering in the forest. I didn't know how to process my grief. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I understood that grief because I lost a part of my family. I mentioned that my business name is Msit, and that Mi'kmaq word translates to all my relations. And what that means is not our relationships with each other as humans, but it's considering all our relations, the animals, the plants, the trees, the insects, the waters, and seeing them as family or as kin, to be treated with the same level of respect, gratitude, and love as I treat my human family. And that is the way I grew up, in that deep relationship. And so through my business, Msit, the work that I do is creating opportunities for people to return home to that relationship. Because all of our ancestors at one time and place in history were in that deep, meaningful relationship that was culturally specific to where they were located. But throughout history, people have been violently separated or severed from those relations. We can still see today many Indigenous people still in that relationship and others who've still been able to, hold on to some elements of that relationship or rediscover that relationship in their life today. And so when we're thinking about this relationship, through Indigenous ways of knowing, it's about thinking about them as kin and thinking about what are we doing in our day-to-day activities? Are we considering them? Because through capitalist ways and even colonial systems that are still present today, that continue to oppress Indigenous peoples, also continue to oppress the land. So reconciliation needs to not only happen with Indigenous peoples, but also with the lands, because they continue to be harmed. So when we're thinking about this relationship, I think about this capitalist view where the land is often seen as a commodity, something to extract from, with little to no reciprocity. And so we continuously look at the land as what can we get from the land? And it's become a very imbalanced relationship. Imagine if you've ever experienced or witnessed a relationship where one person's constantly giving and another is always taking, with little to no acknowledgement or reciprocation. Eventually what happens is that relationship falls apart. It cannot sustain itself. And it's no different than when we're looking at our relationship with the land. And building that relationship with the land is the same way as we build our relationship with each other. It takes time. Thinking of those who are closest to you, your loved ones, right? Maybe the ones that you didn't grow up with, maybe a partner, a close friend. It took time to get to know them, and to get to know them through difficult times and the good times. And it's no different when we spend that time with the land. To get to know the land, because it doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how much years you go to school, you may only know the land up here and not from here. And so how do we find our way back home to this relationship? Listening to the land from our hearts, being guided by our hearts, thinking of them when we're thinking of the generations ahead, that we're not just thinking of the generations of people, we're also thinking of the generations of the plants, the animals, the insects, the waters. Because in all creation stories, whether they're religious, spiritual, or evolution, humans were the last to arrive on this earth. The earth has been able to survive and thrive without us, but we cannot survive without the earth. So I invite you to find your way home to that relationship and start thinking about what can we give back in our day-to-day for all that the earth gives us, not only for us to survive, but for some to thrive. For the earth has always been and still is our first healer, our first teacher, and our companion. So I want to say, Gichimikwech, Walalio, thank you, and may the forest be with you.
I needed that, otherwise you would wonder where she's speaking from. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ambika Tenneti. I'm an environmentalist and an advocate who advocates for urban nature and immigrant well-being. As a PhD candidate at Daniels Forestry, University of Toronto, I have been immersed in the study of human-nature relationships. What are some of your favorite nature spaces? Do you have secret spaces and hidden gems that you enjoy visiting? How do you access those spaces? Who took you there? Did you find it by yourself? So these are some of the questions we need to think about when I'm talking about access to nature. A lot of the points of my speech seem to have been covered by Iraz. But I'm going to talk about something a little different. Because my topic is about how access to nature is complicated for recent racialized immigrants. I focused my research on community engagement for racialized immigrants in Toronto's urban forest. I explored inclusion opportunities and barriers faced by them. I found that access to nature is more than just about proximity. Again, Iraz and Melissa have pointed that out to you. In research, there are 6 dimensions to access. It is about accessibility, availability, affordability, adequacy, acceptability, and most importantly, awareness. People need to be aware where the nature space is. I was a recent immigrant when I started my research. I connected with organizations that encourage groups of immigrants to explore the city and its parks and ravines on foot, by bike, and public transit. I used that experience to help curate walks in nature in the city for new immigrants and for racialized international students. At every walk, I heard someone say that they did not know this park existed or that they could access this park so easily by public transit or foot. They had this belief that they needed a car to access such a space. During COVID, I took friends to nearby ravines because often they were unable to find the entrances despite my telling them where they were, because these entrances tend to be well hidden and look like somebody's backyards. So many of our Toronto parks, ravines, and trails are secret spaces and hidden gems, which makes us question whose secret spaces are these? Who are they hidden from, and why? So what are some of the barriers that recent racialized immigrants face in accessing nature? I have seen some very dangerously steep paths that youth take to access ravines because that is the shortest route available to them where they live. Mothers with strollers and the families with the elderly people avoid going into ravines exactly for the same reason, steep slopes. And people avoid parks when they're located across a busy street or a busy road because it's dangerous for them along with their kids. Youth told me that they avoid going into nature because they are unable to identify poison ivy and giant hogweed. And every new season, we have media reports about coyotes and the seasonal return of ticks and mosquitoes. When you're not aware of what nature is like, you tend to be scared of it. And they're also scared of cyclists going too fast in the ravines and dogs running off leash. So we have that, and then we also know that immigrants feel a sense of belonging. Wherever they are, they feel a sense of belonging in nature, and they feel a sense of well-being. Again, Iraz and Melissa have pointed that out. Nature does not differentiate or discriminate. It does not judge them for their accent. It does not judge them for their skin color. But some white people in nature make racialized communities and immigrants feel excluded from these spaces. Immigrants report a fear of others and othering. Parents fear for the safety of their children and young daughters. Adult men and women fear verbal and or physical assault. Racialized women and young girls in hijab fear the gaze when they visit predominantly white neighborhoods. And black men and boys fear the police. Certainly, places are not racist, discriminatory, or angry, but people can be. All this can mar the experience of nature for recent racialized immigrants. So what are some things that can make immigrants feel more welcomed in these spaces? Facilities such as washrooms and water fountains encourage park visits, as do maps, signage, and well-lit paths. Families with children prefer play areas, and those with the elderly look for picnic tables and benches. Their park wish list included shelters from rain and wind. When asked about memories of parks from back home that they miss in parks here, immigrants mentioned food vendors, nature education materials, outdoor gyms, and recreational areas for youth. When planning and redesigning inclusive nature spaces, the question is not only who is at the table, but who is setting the table. Often, we read about parks and their visitor satisfaction surveys. Should we not try to find out who is not visiting these parks and why they are not visiting so that we can respond to their needs better? Decisions on parks and park infrastructure rely on public consultation, participation, including the user feedback. However, low-income, marginalized, and racialized communities are often left out of these conversations, leading us to question who is seen and who is heard. In nature-based activities, there is a low rate of participation among recent racialized immigrants. Is it that they are not interested in participating in these activities? Or is it that organizations don't want them there, or that organizations don't know how to engage them? They are at a loss in figuring out what to do. The universal colorblind approach to engagement in nature excludes racialized communities. We need to remember that immigrants face language, financial, and transportation barriers when they arrive. Also, they are not aware of many of the resources that are available to them when they come here. Recent immigrants don't learn of nature-based programs because the system to welcome immigrants does not share these resources openly. This limits their knowledge about nature, nature spaces, and nature-based opportunities available. Finally, immigrants tend to live in areas that are struggling with social issues where organizations may think nature-based programming is irrelevant in this area. I want to stress that in this age of climate change and global warming, we need to build bridges across social justice and environmental issues and tackle both of them together. We need nature-based programming in immigrant neighborhoods to encourage their participation in nature advocacy efforts across the country. Humans are a part of nature. We recognize that. Community engagement in nature needs to change. Access to nature should not be a privilege, especially when that privilege is based on race. Toronto is a multicultural city, and nature in Toronto needs to be multicultural too. Access to nature matters. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dianne Whelan, and I am a documentary filmmaker, author, photographer. Every trail has a story, and every person that does that trail will have their own story too. This is my story about the 28,000 kilometer Trans-Canada Trail, which is the largest recreational trail in the world. This baby is brand new. It was born in 2017. It connects 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific. It is made up of 487 different land and water trails, all stitched together to form one long trail across this land. My goal was to do one continuous line, starting in St. John's, Newfoundland, going across Canada to northern Alberta, paddling 4,000 kilometers up to the Arctic Ocean, and then coming back down to Victoria. That was the idea. I had made a film on Everest. I'd made a film in the high Arctic, so my idea was to make a film on this journey called 500 Days in the Wild, which actually just opened up in theaters across Canada, and you can stream it on Paramount Plus. So for an artist like me, the trail isn't just a physical thing. It's like an umbilical cord. It's a metaphor. It's an umbilical cord that connects us all across this land. And I went looking for a new story, one that honored the story of this land that goes back thousands of years ago. I wanted a story that includes everyone. And I felt like a trail that connects us all would be a really good place to find that story. And of course, the trail had never been done. Over what became 6 years, I followed old rail lines and single-track trails through forests and along coastlines. I paddled thousands of kilometers in a canoe on ancient indigenous water trails, and I followed dirt roads and paved pathways through Canadian cities. All trails, different pages in the storybook of this land. And along the way, I learned 7 things that I want to share with you right now. What being on a trail almost every day for 6 years taught me. 1, it doesn't matter if you're walking a block, a kilometer, or 5 kilometers, it all begins with putting one step in front of the other. This is an incredibly powerful lesson, actually, if you think about it, to be reminded about every day on your 20-minute walk or your 2-hour walk, because every goal that you seek to achieve in your life can be achieved if you can actually break it down into small steps. When I left Newfoundland on July 1st, 2015, if I had thought about the 24,000 kilometer line I was about to begin, I would never have begun. My mind would have said, this is not logically possible. There's a couple reasons for that. One of which is I had just turned 50 when I left, not exactly the age that you're going to, embark on an extreme adventure. And the second thing, of course, was that I'm not an extreme athlete. I'm an artist. But I wasn't thinking about it that way. The way I decided to think about it was I was just going to put one step in front of the other and try my best and just do what I could every day. The second thing I learned was the importance of being in the moment. When you're out in nature, you have to be in the moment. You are aware of it doesn't really matter what's going on in the news, it doesn't matter what's going on at home. When you're out in nature, what matters is what's the temperature, what's the air, what's happening around me right now? Is the wind picking up? What's happening in the sky? What's happening on the water surface? Maybe a bird is chirping, a little woodpecker's going for it. These are the things that kind of bring you to your attention. Are there tracks on the ground, fox tracks, deer tracks? Who am I sharing my space with right now? So one of the second gifts of being out on the trail is it brings you to the moment. The third thing that I would like to bring attention to is the respect for nature. 6 years out there, and I knew that there was no way I was going to conquer anything. It wasn't about conquering anything. It was going to be about connection to, a connection with. The only way I would be able to survive this journey was to respect nature. And, during my time out there, I realized that humans are just 0.001% of all life on Earth. And when we step outside of these urban environments, whether for a walk through a city park or deep into the forests, we connect to that other 99.9%. So, number 3, respect for nature and that reconnection to the web of life, that reminder that we are a part of something much larger than we are. The fourth thing I learned and remembered was, the best things in life are free, a hand to hold, a smile, a laughter, but also the trails are free. All trails are free. I mean, the Trans-Canada Trail is 28,000 kilometers of free trails, but we have a lot of trails. And this is an incredible asset. There are people in communities across this country right now working very hard to keep these trails accessible for us all and for the future generations. And I'll repeat again what's been mentioned a few times this evening is, of course, the health benefits of taking that hour out every day. It's been proven now by medical agencies all around the world that, walking is the best form of exercise. It's good for your mind, it's good for your body, it's good for your emotional health. So it's free, and it's one of the best medicines that you have at your disposal for your good health. Number 6, and this one was really a big healing one for me, is that when you're out on the trail, what divides us doesn't matter as much. In the 6 years that I traveled across this country, I met hundreds of people out there on the trail. No one ever asked me, are you liberal, NDP, or conservative? It just didn't matter, right? What mattered was that we had found ourselves in the same place at the same time. And so the conversations would be more like, hey, did you see that moose over there? Or, hey, there's a great place to get drinking water up there. Or, you want to come sit by my fire? And it brought people together, diverse people I might not normally have sat down and talked to. So trails are an incredible place where maybe what we share becomes more important than what makes us different. And number 7, fostering a connection to nature will probably save our species. If you teach a child that a tree is lumber for a house, they're not going to really be that inspired to protect that tree. But if you teach that child that that tree produces oxygen, it converts carbon dioxide into oxygen and produces air that we and all living species require on Earth, now you're bringing something else to the table. Trees also have medicine, trees also have shade, and trees also have wisdom. One of the best lessons I learned on the trail came from my time with the trees. I left a fervent individualist, and one morning when I was dragging my canoe out of the snow where I got stranded, I had a lot of time to think about that individualism, and I came to the realization that maybe it was actually an illness. And as I was sitting there and thinking this, I was looking, every tree on the surface looks like it stands alone. But beneath the surface, all those trees, all their roots are interconnected, and so too are we. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of our survival based on teaching our children a love and a respect for nature. It is going home, you know? So in conclusion, when you walk or paddle a part of the Trans-Canada Trail near you, or any trail on this land, that for all our differences between each other, this is what connects us all. We share home. We share a responsibility to look after nature and nurture this land as stewards to protect the water, the air, and our food supply, because we have a responsibility to generations of those who come after us. We are yesterday's descendants, but we are tomorrow's ancestors. And the trail connects us all. Thank you very much.
Wow. To recap, thank you, Sean, Kheraj. The history of pipelines and how we talk about the environment is always changing. Marlaine, Koehler, the power of the people. We got ourselves trails, and we are on the trails day in and day out. Iraz, Soyalp, despite it being all around us, nature isn't necessarily available to all of us, and access to nature is a human right. Dr. Melissa Lem, I think a lot of us are going to be saying, well, Dr. Lem says I need to go outside right now, so doctor's orders. Thank you, not only for the reminder, but really for the evidence and the prescription. Carolynne, Crawley, initiation by wasp nest. Wow. Reconciliation needs to happen with the land and with our hearts. Ambika, Tenneti, how do we share, how do we promote, and how do we discover nature spaces? And when we find that secret spot, to invite others to join us and make sure we get the word out so it's available to all. And Dianne, Whelan, you are hardcore. Wow, thank you for inspiring us and reminding us to be in the moment, to be in nature, and to access these free trails across the country. A big round of applause to all of our talkers. What incredible knowledge and wisdom. So I'm going to invite our front row of talkers to get up now and head to the reception. We want to give them a moment to get a drink and catch their breath. While they do that, I'm going to tell the rest of the room more about what we have coming up with the Walrus. If you enjoyed tonight's event, we have another talks right here at the Isabel Bader Theatre in Toronto on Tuesday, April 9th. Concordia University presents the Walrus Talks It's Electric. At the Walrus Talks It's Electric, Canada's leading researchers will have engineers, environmental scientists, and experts will be discussing the future of electrification, the progress, the potential of advanced energy storage, smart grids, the electrification of transportation, and the industrial and social implications of an equitable transition to a decarbonized future. There's a lot of talk about this right now, and I'm really interested in learning more. We encourage you, if you haven't already, to sign up to our newsletter. For those of you in the room, we have a table outside and we can set you up. Otherwise, we'll be in touch via email and you can opt in when you receive that email in your inbox tomorrow. We encourage you to subscribe to the Walrus. We have a special offer for those of you in the room, just for you, a full year's subscription to the Walrus delivered straight to your door, 8 issues for $25. That's an incredible deal. Just visit the Walrus table and we can sign you up. The Walrus is home to Canada's community-supported conversation. That means our journalism and events like this one are made possible by people like you. Unlike other journalism organizations, the Walrus is a registered charity with an educational mandate, and our independent fact-check journalism is powered by donations from our community of supporters, and this is so that we can give everyone the access they deserve to reporting and conversations that matter. If you'd like to ensure that we can continue creating stories that matter and events like this one, consider supporting independent media and fact-based journalism with a donation. You can visit us online at thewalrus.ca/donate or stop by that table in the lobby. All gifts of $20 or more will receive a charitable tax receipt. Another round of thank yous. Thanks again to everyone at Manulife and Trans-Canada Trail for making tonight's conversation possible. A big thank you to our annual sponsors, Air Canada, Inspire, RBC Emerging Artists, Rogers, and Via Rail Canada. And thanks you for attending in person and online and being a part of the Walrus community. I really look forward to continuing this conversation and getting out in nature. To be continued.